Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel. If you are new here, I am Aluta and I will help you improve your skills in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In this video, we're going to build an exam score ranking program with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In the program, you'd enter your exam score, and when you click on the button, it will rank your score for you. So if you enter a score, let's see, 100, it will tell you that you ranked platinum. 80, it's a gold. 70 is a silver. 40 is a bronze. And what if you don't enter anything and click on the button? It will prompt you to enter your score first. So without wasting time, let's get into the video. This is my VS Code workspace where I have my HTML document, CSS file, JavaScript file, and we have this background image we use for the project. We go back into the HTML document and we generate the boilerplate by typing in the exclamation sign and pressing tab. We go into the head section and change the title of the document to Score Rank Evaluator. And when we refresh our page, it appears over here. Next, we will link our CSS file, style.css, to our HTML document so that any styles we apply in the CSS file will apply to our HTML elements. Next, we go to the website of Google Fonts and search for the Pappens font family because we will use this particular font family. So we get the embedded code. And here is the code. We copy the code and paste it in the head section of our HTML document. Next, go into the body elements and link our JavaScript file to our HTML document. This way, any code we enter into the JavaScript file will apply to our HTML elements. Now let's build the structure of our program. So create a main element and give it a class name of container. And this will be the parent element. Inside the main element, create an image with the image tag, and the value of the source attribute should be the file name of our background, background.jpg. And add an alternative text of header image. So this text will appear if by one reason or the other, our image doesn't appear. And that is good practice. Now we set the width of our image to 100 pixels so we can see it clearly. And this is what we have. Next, create an H1 element with an inner text of exam score ranking. And this will be the heading of the program. Next, we create a div section and give it a class name of input field. And this input field div will hold our input box. Now, inside this input field div, create an input field with a type attribute and value of number. Give the input field an ID of input field and add a placeholder text. Enter your score here. And this is what we have. Next, create a button and give it an ID of submit button. And the button should have an inner text of submit score. Because when you click on this button, we want to submit the score we enter into the input field. Next, create a paragraph element and give it a class name of rank. We also give it an ID of rank output, and it should have an inner text of your rank will appear here. And in this paragraph element, the rank based on the exam score will be displayed over here. And this is all the markup we need. We come into the CSS file to add style to our program. So first select all elements with the global element selector, which is the asterisk, and set the margin to 0, set the padding to 0, and set the box sizing property to border box. And when you do this, any paddings or borders you add to elements will be added to the element's total width and height. Next, we style the body. So we first set the font family of the element inside the body to Pappens, which is the font family we copied earlier using Google Fonts. And we add a fallback font of sans serif because it's good practice. If the browser cannot use the Poppins font family, then it will fall to the sans serif to use it. Set the background of the body to this gray color. Set the minimum height to 100 VH. Now let's centrally place our program in our viewport. So we set the display to flex, justify content center, and set the align items property also to center. And this will centrally place our program both horizontally and vertically. Now we add a padding of 2 REM, and this is what we have. Now let's start the container. So with my container class name, give the container a white background. Remove all borders by setting the border to none. Set the border radius to 12 pixels so we can round in the corners a bit. And we set the maximum width of the container to 500 pixels. Now set the width to 100%, so it will be 100% of that 500 pixels. Now add a padding of 3 REM, that's for the top, 2 REM for the left and right, and 2 REM for the bottom. Now let's align the items inside our container very well. So set the display of the container to flex, and this will turn it into a flex box. Set the flex direction property to column, and set the align items property to center. And this is what we have. I'll set the position of the container to relative, and I'll explain why I do this later in the video. Now let's style the image. So with my container class name, any image which is a descendant, we set the width to 120 pixels. And we go back into the HTML element and remove the width we initially set. And it set the height to 120 pixels also. And this will turn the image into a box, a square box. Now set the border radius to 50%. And this will change it from a box to a circle. And this is what we want. Now set the position of the image to absolute. And when you do this, the image will now stick to any element that has its position property set. So let's say we have any element that has a position property set to relative or any other position value, then our image will stick to it. And when you go back into our container, you can see that we initially set our position to relative. So this way our image will stick to it. So any way we position our image, it will stick to the container div. Now set the top positioning to negative 60 pixels and set the left to 50%. Now transform translates X by negative 50%, and this will place the image in the center of our div section. I'll set the border of the image to 4 pixels solid and give it a white color. And this is what we finally want our image to look like. Now we style our h1 element. So with my container class, any h1 element, set the margin top property to 40 pixels and set the font size to 2 REM. Next, we style our input field div. So with my container, any input field class name, set the margin to 2 rem for the top, 0 for the left and right, and 1 rem for the bottom. And we set the width to 70%. That is 70% of the total width of the container. And then we set the border to 2 pixels solid so that it can be visible. Now let's style our input field. So with my input field div, any input element, set the width to 100%. That will be 100% of the total width of our input field div. And we set the padding to 1 rem for all sides. Now set the font size to 1.5 rem. So increase the size. Set the border to 2 pixels solid black. And we go into our input field div and remove the border we initially set. Now set the border radius of our input to 8 pixels surrounding the corner of the input field, and remove outlines by setting the outline to none. Now let's add some color to the placeholder text. So with my input with a type of number, we use the placeholder pseudo element and set the color to this gray color. Now let's style our button. So we set the display property of the button to inline block and set the width to 70%. That is 70% of the total width of our container. But the styles are not applying. When you go back into our HTML element, you can see that it's an ID and not a class. So we change the dot prefix to a hashtag. So we target an ID name of submit button. Now set the padding to 1.5 rem for the top and bottom, and set it 1 rem for the left and right. Now set the font size to 1.8 rem and bolden the text with the font weight property. Let's set the text color to white and change the background to a linear gradient of these two colors. Now remove borders by setting the border to none and set the border radius to 50 pixels. Now set the cursor to pointer so that when you mouse over our button, we can have a human hand over it. Now when we hover over our button, we want to add a box shadow. So we select our button ID name, and with the hover pseudo class, set the box shadow to this box shadow. Give the box shadow a black color, and we decrease the opacity of our box shadow. And also when we click on the button, we want something to happen. We want to decrease the size. So we select our button ID name, and with the active pseudo class, we set the transform property to scale by 0.9. So it will decrease to a 90% of its actual size. Now let's style our paragraph element. So with my container class name, any element with the class name of rank, set the margin top to 1.5 rem, set the padding to 1 rem, and change the background color to this gray color, a light gray color, and set the font size to 1.1 rem. But the styles are not applying, so we'll come here and add a space between our container class name and our rank class name. And you can see that the styles are now applying. Now set the font weight to bold and add a border radius of 8 pixels. And this is all we need for the style of our program. So now in the JavaScript file, we'll add functionality to our program. So the first thing we'll do is to go into our HTML document and we get the elements that we need. So we grab those elements by their ID names and then we assign them to variables in the JavaScript file. And those elements are the submit button and the paragraph element. So we get their ID names and assign them to variables. Next, we create a function to run the program. I'll call this function the evaluate score. And in the curly braces, we add the code to execute whenever we call our function. So the first thing we'll do is to get the value the user enters into the input field. Let's say 100. So we get this 100 and assign it to a variable input. Next, we add our first if statement. So what if the input field is empty? So if the input, which is the value inside the input field, is strictly equal to an empty string, then we update the text content of our rank output paragraph to enter your score first. And then we change the background color of our rank output paragraph to this reddish color. And finally, we change the font color of our text inside the rank output paragraph to white. And then we add a return keyword to exit the function. Now, what if there is something in the input field? So we'll get the input, that is the value inside the input field, and typecast it into a number and assign it to the variable score. Then we check our next batches of if-else statements. This if statement will target 3 different conditions. So if the score is not a number, or if the score is less than 0, or if the score is greater than 100, then we update the text content of our rank output paragraph to please enter a valid score between 0 and 100. Then we maintain this background color and this color of our rank output paragraph. Then we check our second statement. So else if the score is less than 50. Now what if we enter a number but it is less than 50? We update the text content of our rank output to you netted a bronze. And we change the background color to a bronze color. It is a semi-brown color. And change the text color to black. Then we add our next else if statement. So what if the score is less than 75? Else if the score is less than 75, so that means if the score is between the 50 and the 75, we update the text content of our rank output paragraph to you netted as silver. And change the background color to a different gray color, a different shade of gray, and we maintain the black text color. and we check our next condition. So else if the score is less than 90, so if the score is between 75 and 90, what do? We update the text content of the rank output paragraph to united gold, and we change the background color to golden color, and we maintain the black text color. Then we check our last statement, that is if the score is greater than the 90. So we use the else, and we update the text content of our rank output paragraph to united platinum, and we change the background color to a gray color, and maintain the black text color. Now let's click on the button to see if our program works, and we can see that it's not working, and this is because we've not called the function anywhere. So we select our button with the my button, and we add an event listener. And the event is click. So when you click on the button, then we call the function. Now let's check to see if our program runs. So first enter 100, and we got a platinum. Enter 80, and we get a gold. Enter 60, and we get a silver. Now we enter 40, and we get a bronze. Now let's enter something like, let's say, -2, and we get a prompt that we should enter a valid score between 0 and 100. And what if we don't enter anything at all? The program will tell us to enter our score first. So yeah, that's how to create an exam score ranking program with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I do hope this video helped you out, and if it did, make sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss an upload. Leave a like on this video and comment down below what project you want us to do next. See you in my next video.